to the expansion room. Have you ever felt called towards a deeper healing work with people and wondered, could psychedelic-assisted therapy, be part of that path or part of that journey for you? Today, we are going to explore psychedelic therapy and what it actually is, what it is not, and what it takes to become a psychedelic assisted therapist, and the responsibilities that come with holding space for this kind of work. Today, I'm welcoming back my special guest, Sarie McGlone, licensed therapist, certified psychedelic assisted therapist. And we are going to talk about like the ebbs and flows of this work, the shifts that we're seeing in the world in reference to psychedelic assisted therapy, answer some of the questions that people might have about that, and go from there. So welcome back, Sarie.
Thank you so much again for having me, Shervon. It's always a great time to just sit here and talk with you because there's so much that we always love to unpack, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think that
So,
this is definitely a topic that is like starting to be on the forefront of people's minds, as we are starting to see more and more information coming out about psychedelic therapy and people stepping into this work. There's more and more people who are like actually broaching the subject. And so I wanted to definitely talk about this because both you and I are certified in this work, and I wanted to maybe even dispel some of the misconceptions that maybe people have that are out there. More and more people here in the States, as well as around the world, are talking about psychedelic therapy. I was in Italy last summer in June. I'm in this restaurant. Everyone is speaking Italian around us, and these three ladies are sitting at a table nearby, and all I'm hearing the Italian. My Italian is not good enough to pick up what they're saying until I heard psychedelics. I paused. And these ladies were actually talking about a psychedelic therapeutic experience that they had had, at least two of them. And I was like, wow, okay. I flew all the way to Europe to even hear this conversation. So I think that since it's growing around the world, this is definitely something that we want to talk about. It's great for people's mental health, their emotional well being, but it is not something that you step into doing um, without
yeah,
having, yeah, exactly.
haphazardly, yeah. We
For
don't want to just
either,
jump into that.
ex- exactly. You don't want to do that as a client or even as somebody who's sitting for someone, right? I
Absolutely.
truly believe that you have to actually know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I think that's why the fact that you can even see it on the international scale is very important. Now, there is a shift currently happening in mental health and about specifically bringing psychedelics in to it and really actually doing a lot of great clinical work. I think there's literally no one
Yeah,
that can scroll in LinkedIn and not see something about becoming a psychedelic therapist. If you are in the therapist mental health range, you're going to see
yeah,
a link about it now, like a post. They're all over the place. And I'm sure people have also heard the great work that Johns Hopkins is doing. They were the first to get the federal research trials going. So therefore, they were the first and the
yeah,
oldest to even really start with psychedelics. So there's actually something there,
exactly.
and I think that's where we kind of even merged together of understanding that there was something more. There was something more about the conscious state that we have to be able to open up ourselves more to. Therapy is great. We
Exactly.
love therapy, but if you pair it with something else, it to that allows us to enter into that alternate state of consciousness. We literally
That's
open
it.
up a whole different world for us, and I think that's why it's so important to understand that this could be something, and it's
Hmm.
moving quickly. It's moving very quickly.
Yeah, Absolutely. Now, as you know, because you've been on this show with me before talking about cannabis assisted psychedelic therapy, and I've had Daniel McQueen on to talk about psychedelic therapy, and several others, because over time we've done several different episodes on this show, but this will be the first time that we talk about it from the perspective of becoming either a sitter, a guide, a facilitator, or a therapist in the psychedelic spaces that are really starting to expand in the world. Let's start with the question of what exactly is psychedelic therapy so that we at least remind the audience, right? In one sentence or so, how would you define psychedelic therapy?
If I had to put in this as condensed as I could, it's taking some type of medicine, whether it be plant medicine, or whether it's something derived from some type of animal, frogs, toads, things like that, right? Or
Yes.
just actual mushrooms, right? Like if getting to the, taking it with the intention of having some type of experience and journey work. And the biggest thing when it comes to psychedelic assisted therapy is you have an actual, whether it's a licensed therapist with you, that's what the actual, for that therapy part, or if it's more of a spiritual guide with you that actually is there with you to do the work. And understanding that although these medicines, these medicines are really transformative, they only do about 20% of the work. The 80% is up to you and actually the set and the setting and the person that's helping you guide you through it.
Absolutely. And you just described what the difference between just taking a psychedelic substance for an experience, how that is different. And maybe a friend is sitting for you or you're with some friends, and how it's different from psychedelic assisted therapy, because a person then is sitting with you who is trained to help you through an actual journey experience and help you to prepare for it and integrate it after. And so that's really the
Absolutely.
difference, right?
And
Taking
so
a handful
let's
of
talk about the
mushrooms with a
full
group of
arc.
friends is not usually therapeutic.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the actual arc here. You kind of just mentioned it. It's the preparation sessions. It's the actual medicine
Right.
session, which can last anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. And then it's the actual integration session that afterwards you're not only going through of which you experience, but is it actually preparing you? So again, the preparation, sorry, let me go back. The preparation, first thing we're going to do is make sure that you're a good fit for this, right? We're going to make sure that it's
Yeah.
really about creating a container of safety for not only physically but also emotionally and relationally, and understand that the medicine itself doesn't do all the healing, the person does. And it's our job as therapists and as facilitators to create those conditions, from our own wisdom, our wisdom, our training, to make sure that it is the correct set and setting.
Hmm.
And so therefore the room, the music, the presence, and being able to be a solid foundation for that person, or even I should say a second nervous system for the person in the room to be
Hmm.
able to have a really good journey and experience.
Yeah. And for those who are curious about this field, what would you say typically draws people to becoming a therapist rather?
I would say I think it's so there's a little bit of I think duality here where we have the curiosity of understanding that we can go further. We can go further with this work than what maybe talk therapy might be doing.
Yeah.
I think also
Yeah.
there's
That's what
the
drew
second
me.
side of it. Right. That just being able to go a little deeper and allow for healing to happen in a different container that doesn't look like maybe a cold room of therapy of just sitting on the couch, or actually making it a full a full body experience. I think that, so the curiosity,
Yeah,
but I also think it's the inner work that gets done when you become a facilitator and a trainer. Um, because there's so
absolutely.
much that I think therapists sometimes get a bad rep about not taking care of their own stuff and sometimes coming into the room with other things. And I think with this specific work, there is no opportunity to come into this room and sit with someone and still have your things kind of show up. You have to do a lot of inner work to make sure that you're actually being able to be present there for the other person and guide them through this experience.
Absolutely. Yep. Well said. Well said. Absolutely. I think people who are also in various helping professions are tending to look towards this as an option for them to step into and expand their healing work in the world, helping other people. So, not just us clinical therapists, right? Because there are still clinical therapists out there who think this is like not a great idea, right? So, let's face it,
Yeah.
there's a small percentage of the psychotherapy world that is stepping into this training. But there are people who do other healing work, massage therapy, Reiki work, yoga teachers and yoga therapists in particular, which I'm
Mhm.
also certified for, who are also stepping into this work. And it's been a nice diversity. I'm also seeing a lot more men who are veterans who are stepping into this work, where they've had a psychedelic therapy experience and realized just how much healing they received. And they know that more men who have been through military service and
Mhm.
war need to benefit from this. And so they go and get certified. And so that's been a
Yeah.
wonderful cycle that I'm starting to see in these recent years. So those are
Absolutely.
the folks that I'm seeing kind of stepping into this work. We're also seeing nurses, right?
Yes,
We
absolutely.
know
And I
some
think it's
nurses who
important.
are also in this field.
And I think that's why it's so important because this work isn't about being an expert in psychedelics. Like that's not what this work is. It's
Right,
about
not
being
at all.
grounded, being present, and being deeply honest with your own process and how can you actually then be there for others.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. And so there's oftentimes, as with anything, right? Anything that starts to grow in especially in Western culture, there seems to be misunderstandings that also grow, right? Because people get partial information or misinformation sometimes. So what are some of the misunderstandings that come up in this new emerging field that you've been hearing?
So I guess it depends on which side you're talking about. So if you're talking about it from a client's perspective, it's going to be that they're worried about having a bad trip. They're worried that something is going to be off about it. They're going to have a really bad and dark experience. And to that, I think we always have to then be curious and open ourselves up to if you're thinking it's going to be a bad experience, then it's going to be a bad experience. But if you're opening up yourself
Right.
to be like, oh, let me be curious about what is so dark about this. Let me bring it to the light and let me
Yeah.
actually open that door. It's not as scary anymore. And also to understand that we are still there with you during the whole entire experience. Understanding what you may see might be a lot of visuals and it may feel very real where you have that ego kind of melting. And so therefore it feels very surreal that this is happening in real life right
Hmm.
now. But understanding that we do have, that's the whole point of having a guide with you to let you know, hey, if I'm here, we're still here, you can come back whenever you're ready to come back, and making sure that we just
Yeah.
stay with them in it.
Yeah. And on the guides side, what's one misunderstanding that you've seen?
I think the biggest misconception is that we can do this as therapists. Like, I think that's a big thing. People don't understand that you can actually get trained for this. And people are
Yeah.
just like, well, I did this experience, but understanding that even to run, those actual like sacred circles and ceremonies, it's different when you actually know how to run it in a way of a therapist, just as a small group, just as actually, making sure that the container is correct for the people that are there, and knowing also how to just manage
Yeah.
the different energies in the room, because it will sway a little
Hmm.
bit. So I think that's a really
It
big
sure
one, is
will.
that knowing that we actually can get trained. There are trainings out there that we can do, that make sure that we have a firm foundation and knowing what to do and how to press forward. And then the second thing I think would be, that they don't have to be a pharmacology expert. Like, they don't have to know the all the science and everything right behind it to understand how this plant works. You can't really fake this authenticity. The clients feel everything. So when you're actually in that expanded state, as long as you are actually being real and being present and grounded, they will feel the care that you're trying to give them and get them through this journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I've noticed in talking with people about this, I think so many people don't realize that there's actual training for this, that they just figured people who sit for people are just people who have had the experience before, and therefore you can just sit with someone. They don't always realize that, oh, there's actually a way that you can learn about this and do your own work so that you can offer your presence, your grounded nervous system for someone else who's going through this, and help them prepare, help them process, help them to integrate. I'm still surprised when I meet people who are like, really, you can, there's a training for this. So that's my favorite. I think that's the surprise and the misunderstanding that's out in the world.
Absolutely, and also the fact that present preparation and assessment matter just as much as the session itself.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what I mean by preparation, again, is we're gonna have maybe one or two sessions before we actually, have that medicine session, because we need to understand what are the safety concerns, walk you through the questionnaires, understand the contradictions, and if you are a good fit for the medicine, as well as understanding what is it that you want to get out of this journey. Because if you go in there without an idea, without a plan, it can take you on a wild roller coaster, and we want to make sure that we
Hmm.
put it in a container saying, hey, this is where we're trying to focus on right now, and I will be there to bring you back to make sure that you are actually focusing on the things that you want to.
Absolutely. And that's the guide piece, right? It's just guiding someone along their journey and helping them to move through, in and through, right? So let's pause here for a moment. And I want to kind of put something out for those who are listening, who are like pondering this, like, what is it about, if you're a person who's curious about stepping into this kind of training and then into this kind of work? What is it about psychedelic assisted therapy, psychedelic healing work that genuinely interests you? That's something that you want to really ask yourself. Is it more a curiosity about the medicine itself and its effects, a desire to help people in deeper and more expansive ways, or perhaps a sense that there are dimensions of human consciousness that we only are just beginning to understand, right? So any of those could be true for you. And it's okay, whichever one is true for you. But you'll want to start asking yourself, really, what is driving me? What is moving me towards this work? Just notice what arises with this question for you. And then, if it feels authentic for you, then I encourage you to surely move forward. So for healing professionals and therapists, Sarie, who feel like there's this like curiosity and this path, because there's already so much training, right, that healing
Yeah.
professionals have already done.
Yeah.
What does the training journey actually look like? What did it look like for you as you stepped into the training?
Absolutely. So, I did go through the Medicinal Mindfulness Academy, and that is based for from Daniel McQueen. So again, you've already had him on here, and he has done a really great job of not only making this accessible for not only needs based, diversity based, but people who just want to actually get into the medicine. So there is a scholarship available. But what I would say this looked like for me was I first, of course, reached out. I wanted to know the experiences of other people too. So when I saw that who was connected, even LinkedIn, because I think actually that's where we met, Sharon, is
Yeah,
I
you reached out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
about this training, and I was like, hey, I'm very curious about this. You're in Maryland. How was it? What was that
Yeah.
experience like for you? And so even from there, you gave me the information, and I had just a one-on-one conversation with them. I filled out the application, and they follow up immediately with a one-on-one conversation to be like, hey, is this really for you? I love the fact that they give you us that container to before they just kind of push and say, okay, just pay for this and you'll go through it. They actually allow you to
Yeah.
sit with them
Yep.
and be like, what makes you interested. There's an application process, and the application again is no longer than like a few like a page, but it's just the fact of they want to actually hear what is your reason behind this too, so therefore they're being very
Hmm.
intentional, which I think
Yeah.
that shifted for me. It was like, okay, they're not just trying to get this money, like they're actually being very intentional of who can who not necessarily can do this work, but who is in the right space to do this work and make it accessible
Exactly,
across the
because
board.
I've been connected with the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness now for long enough to see that they will talk with someone who's in the application process and realize they are not in the right space to start to train for this work, and they will let them know that they do not just accept everyone just because they filled out an application and they are ready to pay for the
Exactly.
tuition for the,
And I think
so
that
this
makes
is
such a
not a money
difference.
machine.
Exactly. And that's what makes
Yeah.
such a big difference. And even if, if you are someone who is listening right now is like, let me search, just psychedelic programs, the prices you will see will not compare to the prices that they have. Like it's
Yeah,
literally a
true.
fraction of the cost because they want to make it accessible and it matters to them. And
Yeah.
that I think one set me that was like, okay, this is why I'm definitely leaning this way. But just to go into what the training was actually like, it was a mix of both recorded sessions where we were able to get the background, the understanding of what this medicine is, what it does, how different things play into the set and setting about how to set your room up, how to do the music, how to make sure that you walk your client through the questionnaire about what their previous experiences have been with what their medical and I guess medical history is and mental health history. So they actually gave us so much in-depth work. I think it was over, I want to say it was over like 40 hours worth of recorded content.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like 40 hours of recorded content. And so we did that for about, they gave us time. You can do it on your own schedule. But then they also paired it with, I want to say it was meeting, if it wasn't, I feel like it was every 2 weeks for a little bit, just kind of checking in, doing a drop in session.
Oh, yes,
Just
those are bi-weekly. Yes.
Yeah, the bi-weekly session. So they then offer you a container of a community as well, that people are also learning this all together, which I love that component because it's really easy for us not to be accountable and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna read, I'm read those, I'm gonna watch the recording, and next thing you know, that when that weekly meeting comes up, you're like, I didn't do any of the work. Hold up, and you gotta go back. So I love the fact that it was also in a community. And then after, I want to say it was maybe 3 months of doing the recordings and finishing up all of that process, then we then had the actual next step of the practicum, which I think that's the key right there. That's when you actually
Mm,
get to be in the group. Not only do you guide for others, but others guide for you. So therefore, you can really understand what is this supposed to feel like? What is this container really supposed to look and feel like? It gets out all the tech issues that people may have as well, and just really trying to understand so that you can feel comfortable leading and
exactly.
being the guide in that space. So we did that part, and Then afterwards, I want to say we followed up with a little bit more training. And when I say training, means some more pre-recordings. But if you wanted to go further, so this is mainly for people who were non-clinicians. But if you wanted to go further and actually get that credential as a psychedelic-assisted therapist or specialist, you then go into their credentialing. So again,
Yeah.
this program is also open for people who are non-clinicians, but it gives a clinicians a great backdrop to understand what it is. And because you are clinicians, there are certain things that they will maybe take off. So maybe instead of having to do 6 individual sessions, you only have to do 4, things like
Right.
that. So therefore, to make sure that like, okay, we know you guys have experience. It's just the fact that in this container, we're going to teach you and train you this way.
Indeed.
So
Yeah.
that I think both sides of the training are about 6 months. So technically, you could get this done in a year, but I want to say that I do find that there is sometimes a space in between because of the inner work that needs to be done as well.
Absolutely. It really helps you the way the program is designed. It gives you the skills beyond traditional therapy training if you're a clinician. And it helps if you're not a clinician to give you the skills to do this work so that you feel like you go into these sessions with clients in a way that you feel prepared. It also allows for your own somatic awareness and somatic presence building. So, not everyone is really attuned to their own inner environment, right? And so this kind of training helps you to be attuned to your inner environment, which helps you to then be more attuned to the person who is moving through the journey experience that you're guiding and facilitating for. So it's a beautiful training of how they move from the online piece into the in-person piece. And that really came out of the pandemic, right? You used to, and for most of these trainings around the country, you used to have to get on a plane or get in your car, drive to a place, and be there for a certain amount of time. And of course, the pandemic hits, and this program, as well as many others, have shifted to online and now an online hybrid. And I love the online hybrid effect because it does give you a bit of both so that you can move through the program at your own pace and have that week together with your cohort and then do there's also the practicums after that. So it's to me one of the I love programs that allow you to have an experiential
Hmm.
experience, and this is one of those programs that allows that. Now there are a myriad of other programs around the country. Some of them are in upwards of 10,000, 15,000, and they don't all offer an experiential piece to them, which I find fascinating. Kind of like when I was going to school for my graduate degree in pastoral counseling, and that's where I learned that some psychology and counseling and mental health programs that are out there don't require you to do your own therapy. I was
Wow.
stunned. I was like, why would you become a therapist and never have done therapy for yourself? I don't
Hmm.
get that.
And I
You
think
know?
just thinking about also, I think what you said, like when you were talking about how they really just incorporate it and actually make sure that you're doing that inner work. I think the
Yeah.
fact that they also allow for the framework to not necessarily be altered, but allows you to bring in your own self into the framework as well.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what I mean by that, for those who are listening, it's not that we're saying that the training we can do our own thing or but it's just like how when you choose to do whether ACT, DBT, somatic therapy, things like that, you're able to shift it a little bit. So what that looks like, Shervon, I know you're also a yoga therapist. So what this may look like for you is you're incorporating more of the chakras, right? Or
Right.
those type of things. Or if for me, I do more a little bit more somatic therapy, so therefore that's where we add in the breath work and we're adding in those type of things. So you can still add in those things and still keep to the framework that allows a client to have a better journey experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. So this work requires tremendous amount of responsibility, right? So you're helping someone through this journey, and this is emotional, mental, and spiritual work. And so we would be remiss if we did not also discuss the ethical considerations
Yes.
that people should really think about before stepping into psychedelic assisted therapy work. And so what would you say are some of those things to consider?
So for the ethics of it all, I think that we have to make sure that we are maintaining what we know what we know to be safe. So if I want to talk about the framework here specifically for psychedelic, it doesn't have to be so formal, but understanding that we want to make sure there's some community accountability as well, knowing your limits, knowing what's in your scope. For specifically for the actual training at medicinal mindfulness, they can train on multiple different medicines. So if you know how to do, let's say, cannabis like myself or psilocybin, then you shouldn't be sitting for a ketamine session if you don't know that work.
Right,
So
right.
understanding that all psychedelics are not created equal. So there's, understanding that. I think also the the community, the dual relationships, the boundaries, the power dynamics. When someone is more during their medicine session, they are not necessarily able to do a lot of things. They are probably going to sit there or say lie there, and being able to make sure that it's a safe space for them, letting them know, hey, if I have to step away for a second to go to the bathroom, I'm coming right back to you. Letting them know, are you feeling sick? Having a trash can there, having bottles of water. Again, making sure that they are having a very comfortable space, because at the end of the day, they are trusting you when they are in kind of like an incapacitated state, not fully, but again, not having the full autonomy to
Yeah,
be safe with you.
right. Yeah. You want them to feel safe with you. And so that is definitely part of the training. Power dynamics, also having a general understanding of trauma informed care, right? And this
Yes.
is something that is a very powerful aspect of medicinal mindfulness is training. It's trauma informed from the first
Top to
piece of
bottom.
paperwork. Like if you're a person who is participating, being a client in a psychedelic assisted experience, whether group or individual, from the first piece of paperwork you see all the way through integration, trauma informed. Same with their training. First, when you first start filling out paperwork with them to either do the application process, you realize this is a trauma informed program. This program was started by two trauma informed therapists, and so they have woven that into their training experience for people.
And just to touch on that, because even when I did my interview for the actual the academy, it was literally asking, is there anything that currently might be going on that might influence or might be something a big trauma for you that you have not worked through with outside parties, with your therapist? So therefore,
Right.
before you even bring that in here, let's talk about it, let's address it. If there's financial restraint, certain things that literally may cloud your judgment, we're going to make sure that we're actually talking about it and bringing it to the light rather than trying to push it down. So
Yeah.
definitely very trauma informed, but also
Yeah.
understanding that one, the assessments, right? Because that's a big thing for ethics. Understanding the assessments and the screening, that they do exist. There is a psychedelic safety questionnaire,
Right.
and understanding that the different medical and psychological histories, the readiness, if you're actually ready to do a actual journey, and as well as if there's any contradictions with active psychosis, any psychosis risk,
Yeah.
any untreated substance abuse, or any severely untreated conditions that you have not even dealt with or even gone to see someone for. I think that's the big thing, because this is not one of, no matter what psychedelic it is, it's really not one of those medicines where you don't want to at least do some of the back work and some of the background to understand why you're pursuing this.
Exactly, exactly. I think the other piece is they talk about the importance of boundaries and verbalizing those boundaries in the space, as well as the importance of integration, right?
Hmm.
Integration support, because yes, you can as a client have this kind of experience and process it, but how are you trying to then integrate your experience, what you've learned, what you've now questioned, right,
Hmm.
and what new things you want to then incorporate or bring into your life as you let go of some of these other things, right? You want to have that support to talk through that, right? And some of that integration will happen with the person who is your facilitator, and then it will then continue maybe with your own therapist, with a
Hmm.
trusted friend or family member or partner, but because integration can be this ongoing thing. It's these wonderful aha moments that happen based on your experience with the medicine, but it will start with the person who guided and facilitated your journey experience. And so the training really hones in on that, because that is one of the responsibilities. And that's what makes it different than just taking a bunch of mushrooms or a bunch of medicine with a bunch of friends.
Right. And I think literally you just said the responsibilities of the actual guide and therapist. Because if I'm not mistaken, after you have the journey, it's on us to make sure that we are available to meet with you between 24 and 48 hours right after that. So therefore, it's not that we're gonna be like, "Oh, I'll see you in 2 weeks," and we'll talk
Hmm.
about this later. Like this is a very profound experience, and we're gonna be there,
Right.
not available for you just for after the first 6 to 8 hours of sitting there with you, but also we're available to be like, "Okay, what else came up for you that even maybe you went to sleep and you were like, oh my God, I gotta tell her this." Okay, well let's
Yeah.
talk through this. Let's integrate it and let's bring it back. So therefore, you can get these things out rather than sitting with it for a full 2 weeks and being like, "Well, I don't remember what I was telling you about before." So again, that's still a good responsibility for us, and always good to also have a journal next to you.
Always. Always. Right. Very true. And so if someone is curious about this work or feels a sense that they are being pulled towards becoming a psychedelic assisted therapist, what would be a grounded first step for them to take?
A grounded first step to them to take. I would probably say doing some inner work for themselves. If they're ready to actually do the training, I would say do your research. Again, we've mentioned medicinal mindfulness, but I know there are others. And trying to make sure that if the program fits right for you. There's a
Yeah.
lot of different ways people do things, but if the program fits right for you, if there are any actual licensed clinicians available to the program, who made the program, if this, just I think that does give us a better understanding, because even though this work has been done for centuries on more of a spiritual and ancestral ceremonial uh, layer platform, um, I think we're adding another caveat here, another layer here of being actually clinical practice and clinically practiced therapists, to really make sure that this is foundational too, and that kind of goes into it, being able to hold space for a person at this capacity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, I think too, you mentioned talking to the clinicians who are part of those programs, and just like seeking out a brand new psychotherapist, I always suggest to people that they do a little bit of interviewing of therapists, call around, get two or three or four different sessions in with two or three or four different therapists to see which one is a good fit for you and your circumstance. In this work, same thing. If this is the work you are feeling called to, investigate, do your research, like Sarie was saying, and maybe pick the top three programs that seem to have all of the things that you're looking for, at least most of those things, and then see if there's someone who can talk with you. Someone who's been through the program is the best way to do that, not just someone who's running or who created the program. That's how Sarie met me. I've talked to a number of other folks that way who reach out and want to know more about the Center of Medicinal Mindfulness program in particular. But that's, I think, the best way. You then get a feel,
Yep.
right? And then you narrow it down, right?
Yep.
And you start the process, the application process. And I encourage you, if you're moving through an application process and something starts to feel wonky, pause.
Yep.
Do not continue to move forward until you get whatever questions answered you feel
Very.
like you need.
I think that's so important because it's just we want to make sure that we're stepping into the right space. It's not as
Absolutely.
clear cut as how
Yeah.
many hours are they giving me, how many how many videos, what's the what is this, but also
Hmm.
what's the after look like after you
Yeah.
finish. Do the people stay around? Do they want to be involved in that program?
Yeah.
Do they actually have groups for you to still can keep connection, so therefore you're not just out here by yourself? That's we
Yeah.
thrive in the community, and I think that's honestly what I've seen, at least in the psychedelic community, is that it is honestly a lot more rigid than even the clinical community. Like they're, they might not be
Yeah.
as formal,
Yeah.
with, we're more relational. We're more like we talk as if we're friends and very comforting, but at the same time, we also are checking each other and we check. It's like, is that really showing up for you there? Like they will check you. And I think that's a really important, and a good community to feel held like that is important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is such an evolving field. And so more and more conversations like this help to bring clarity to people and responsibility to the work, I believe. I think this is a very exciting time as we continue to see the expansion of this field and of this work. So, Sarie, thank you so much for joining me again for this important conversation and for sharing of your experience and your perspective as well with the audience. It's much appreciated. I think that I would be remiss in also not if I didn't talk about the fact that the Center of Medicinal Mindfulness is getting ready to prepare for their fall training time, and it's really summer fall because the online portion begins during the summer, and then the actual in person portion happens at the end of September usually, or some in the middle of September. So if this work does call to you, and you're curious about the programs at the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness, and you have questions, feel free to reach out to either of us so that you can get your questions answered. I am going to include the links to how to reach both of us in the show notes, as well as a link to the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness's training page, which will give you all the information about the application process, the timeline. I believe that the timeline starts with the applications. I want to say it's end of April, early May,
That sounds
somewhere in
about
there.
right.
And then the actual online coursework starts during the summer. And then I think that's in July, and then the in person is in September. So, not a lot of time to kind of get things started. But we will be hosting one of those in person groups here in the Maryland, DC area. So, if you're local, and you really do want to step into this work and you have questions, please feel free to reach out. We're here to answer any
Absolutely.
questions that you have.
Thank you
You're
again so much,
so
Shervon.
welcome. So welcome. If you would like to share with the audience, what's the best place for them to reach out to you? And then I'll also include that in the show notes.
Absolutely. So you can always reach out to me at Sarie at McGloneConsulting.com.
Right, perfect. All right, and to everyone who is watching, thank you for sharing this time with us here in the expansion room. And I look forward to hearing or seeing you all next time.
See you next time.